Always like to ask that one. What was last class on? Tell everybody over there.
Foreclosure.
Yeah, last class was on the foreclosure process. And tonight we're going to talk about development, and the case study that we're going to talk about is going to include a little bit of a talk about distress and a distress purchase. Do we have class next week?
No.
No, look, China's winning over here. I'm gonna have you guys face the classroom. Face the classroom. No, here, we'll move over. Move over. No, but I don't do it that way. Say, when will you get your exam? China's getting it. You're probably going to get it tonight. You probably will get it tonight. It's going to be posted in Blackboard tomorrow, but I did work on it. You're probably going to get it tonight. When is your exam due? Yes. Next Tuesday at 10 a.m. It's due Tuesday at 10 a.m. Tuesday the 13th at 10 a.m. What? Same as, do we have 5 questions next week?
No.
No, because we don't have class next week. So you're done. Who has the 5 questions? Arturo, can you collect them and give them over here? This will show you what they're thinking about when they look at your website. What? Well, I want the 5 questions separate, and Annalie, if you can collect the speaker notes, that's great. Is time of the essence on this exam?
Yes.
Yes. What does that mean?
You have to turn it in before the due time, which is Tuesday at 10 a.m. and turn it in.
And nothing will happen to you if you turn it in early. It will all be fine. But if you turn it in within the last 10 minutes, all those things happen. The computer crashes, like your coffee maker explodes. I know all those things because I've been hearing about them for 6 or 7 years. So time is of the essence, and don't wait till the last minute. What sections will the exam be on? What will the exam cover? Well, what exactly? It sounds like loose nose. What is it? So, you don't have to answer them all. It just gives you an idea like where they are. 5 questions right there. Yeah, it's like Passover, but it's not 5. It's not 4, it's 5. Passover in the classroom. Exactly right. So, I'm going to introduce Mr. Hollow, and we can call him Wayne. But because he's here tonight, we are having the dinner, and I like to save him for last because this class is really a synthesis of all the classes that we've had so far. And we're going to learn, how do you start as a developer? Did they start building something like Panorama Tower? What year did they start in? A lot of people tell me after they take this class, the first thing they want to do is go be a developer. And we're going to learn if that's the first thing that you can do, or, if you're building skills while you're in this class, while you're working in your jobs, to put in your toolbox to be a developer. So I want to quote Wayne on a few quotes that he's given me. He let me use these at our developer luncheon with Swire in March 2016. Anybody was there? Yeah, you guys were there. So I hope you remember what he said, but if you don't, I'll tell you. He said, don't do what's already been done. Use your creativity and vision to see what the city needs and do your own thing. Don't copy what's already there. And another thing that he said is don't just put up a concrete structure. Give it form and substance. Create an aura, a lifestyle, an ambiance. Look inside yourself for creativity. Don't settle. A building is a creation and a sculpture. And I think we're going to see throughout what he has to share with us tonight that he and his family haven't just built one building. They've sculpted and molded a lot of the city that we know of as Miami today. And we're going to learn about why he said that and what that means to what we're learning. But Wayne has been working at Florida East Coast Realty for over 30 years. And in his tenure with the company, he's been involved in all aspects of the real estate business. Wayne began in the construction division and then moved into property management and leasing. He also served as a primary liaison with various departments and agencies of the U.S. government, which have leased hundreds of thousands of square feet from the company. Currently, he's the executive vice president, and he's involved in virtually all aspects of the company, most notably responsible for the company's sales and acquisition of land and improved properties, the financing and refinancing of the company's acquisitions and existing portfolio, and the construction, financing, and development of the company's new and upcoming projects. Additionally, Wayne has assumed oversight, administration, and management of most operational facets of the company and its projects. Wayne manages the SSAE 16 type certified Miami Data Vault, Miami's finest, most secure co-location and disaster recovery center, and home to some of the nation's most renowned providers of technical services. He also has been directing the company's projects in Las Vegas, including Rainbow Sunset Pavilion, Red Rock Business Center, the Lenox, and the Palms. Wayne was educated at the University of Florida and has served as a non-Florida non-attorney on the Florida Bar Grievance Committee, and has also been a member of the Anti-Defamation League and the Miami Deed Club. He currently serves on the executive board for Beth Am Israel in Cooper City, Florida, as well as the executive board for the South Florida Digital Alliance and the Technology Advisory Board for the Miami Downtown Development Authority. And if you were on the boat, we heard from Alice Robertson of the DDA, and she gave us our sunglasses, right, our property eyes. Wayne, through his family's charitable foundation, is a supporter of the Morning Family Foundation and Overtown Youth Center, and also supports health education in inner city high schools by working with Health Corps, founded by Dr. Mehmet Oz. Wayne's also involved with Florida International University, where he's been guest lecturing in my class for about 6 years. Yeah. So with that, that's a pretty serious bio, but I want to ask him, do you have a fun fact? Everybody in the class has shared a fun fact. Do you have a fun fact to share with us?
When I drive real fast with the top down, my hair gets messed up. As you can tell.
So we're gonna start, and I guess what I'd like to do is have you tell us. We can pull up the website for the project. We could watch the video first, or you could tell us a little bit about it. Do you want to watch the video to get some images in their minds, or? There's like an 8-minute video. It has you do a cameo in it. It's a little long. We can watch the pour. Yeah, we're gonna watch the video. Okay.
What you're gonna see here is this panorama is not to get.
Oh wait, I took the mic. You need it. So we have people joining us online too. So
Not to get ahead of ourselves, but Panorama is will be the tallest residential structure south of New York. So it's a record setter in many ways. One of the ways was in March of last year, we did the largest single concrete pour in South Florida, and actually in Florida, which was 3,500 tons of steel and almost 15,000 cubic yards of concrete. So they took what was 30 hours and they condensed it into 2 minutes. So it's kind of cool to see if you notice, you'll see just 1,300 concrete trucks pulled up, and you see it all condensed in 2.5 minutes, and that's what I think we're gonna see now. The other ones are, I think, a little lengthy.
the other one's a little lengthy. Wait, I just picked.
There's not enough of me in it.
There's only a cameo.
Right, that's not good. We don't want to see it.
I don't
Doesn't
think
star
there's
me, we
anything
can see
of
it.
you in the concrete pour, but the concrete pour thing is.
You'll see these things that look like spiders moving around on the site, but those are actually concrete pumps. door to this building to the east. But it will be interconnected with this building with a covered walkway. And as I'm sure you all know, the parking is in that building. So there'll be when we're done laying out the parking, there'll be a segregated area for the office tenants of this building, separate elevators to preserve the security and the integrity of the residential tower over there. But the idea was to create not just another building, but to create a complex inclusive of these buildings.
So what we're going to do, normally I give you guys the study questions afterwards, but we're going to be talking through the purchase of the property, what it was when it was purchased, the vision now, and basically going through a lot of issues that we've talked about in class. So I have questions that I'm going to hand out to you. They're not due, you don't have to have them be due, but it's just to keep in mind the subjects that we're going to go over, because we're going to go over a lot of subjects, and I find sometimes if you take notes, and if you have a focus, a way to think about what you're hearing, you'll remember it for the future. So I have that for you tonight. So I'm going to pass that out, but while I'm passing that out, Wayne, can you tell us about why was the property for sale? Well, who bought it in 2006, and how much did they buy it for before you guys?
This property sat here essentially, it was purchased by Africa Israel, which was I think they're the world's largest diamond brokers, if I recall.
Diamonds.
Diamond.
That's not real.
Diamond.
I love diamonds.
You see, in
That's
2000,
right?
I'll call them for you.
Alright, so that's not real estate.
There's one diamond buried under the building, if you can find it. It's yours.
You're gonna have the whole class looking at
We're gonna dig the whole thing up. In 2004 to 2006, everything that was built in Miami sold. Everybody was a developer. Everybody put up condominiums. The market was amazing. The appraisers were all crooked, and the banks wanted to put out all the money, so nobody said anything. Hence, you ran into 2007, 8, 9, when the market really crashed because there were an abundance of foreclosures because everybody over-leveraged. And during the peak time, there were people who were overpaying. This property came on the market on a open bid process, which typically we don't participate in, but we like the site very, very much. And we're developers. We're not investors, meaning I'm not looking to buy these buildings and put in money and tenant them and then sell them or leverage them and live on the income. We're here to redevelop and create. So when we acquired this property, we knew what we could do with it. So,
Because in 2006,
so I was just gonna say, in 2006, Africa Israel, we bid about $40-some million. Africa Israel bid $73 million. They got it. And they let the building sit here in complete disrepair, waiting for the market to come back so they could build condominiums. So obviously the market didn't come back in time for them, so they decided to put the property on the market.
they had,
No.
they had the property entitled, they did the work, they went through the permissions with the city, they had the property entitled. So a lot of times, you'll meet someone, they say that I'm a developer, I bought this piece of property, I have it entitled, it's a sure thing. But the market turned, and for them, it wasn't a sure thing, and they lost many of their properties.
They gave up. They built the Marquee. You probably know the Marquee over in Brickell and Biscayne and was it 10th or 11th. Somehow they got through that property. But this one they walked away from. We did an all cash offer. When the market is bad, when the market's bad, and prices drop because nothing's selling, is when we go out into the market and buy the next site. And the reason we do that is because we're a little bit different as a developer. We only do one project at a time. We have a lot of in-house expertise. We started as a construction company, so we have our own architects and engineers, etc. And our projects are very large. So we want to do it and we want to do it right. And that allows us to maintain a sufficient amount of liquidity that I can come into a deal like this and throw an offer, all cash offer on the table, you know, real quick, 30-day closing, and make a deal. So we ended up paying $50 million for what they paid $2 or $4 million for.
Was it a foreclosure or were they?
No, that was a straight third-party sale, but the building was empty. There were maybe 3 tenants in, I think, Bank of Venezuela, and a couple of the consulates were in here, and that was it. So we paid cash, because when we buy a site, you form a new corporation to acquire the site. Everything is single purpose, you know, single purpose entities. I really don't care, but it's really a lender-driven requirement. From their perspective, it's bankruptcy remote, so if one property were to fall on hard times, it doesn't affect any other property. So each property, in the old days, one company could own everything and be the borrower of all the properties, and but when CMBS came along and they needed to securitize, everything had to stand alone and by itself. So every acquisition is done through a new corporation. That corporation obviously has no money. So Florida East Coast Realty is the umbrella company that funds all the pre-development acquisition and pre-development expenses and on a cash basis. And we typically don't close any financing until we're ready to break ground on the project. In fact, very often we start construction without a loan because our timing tells us now's the time to start. And we're very comfortable that the loan is forthcoming. So that's not unusual for us to do.
You guys bought the property in 2010?
9.
9. Okay, so they bought it in 2009. So we also see in real estate, especially in South Florida, we see a cycle. So sometimes it's important to see when was the vintage that a property was bought, because it might tell you a little bit of a story about the sale. It was previously purchased in 2006.
Yeah, I think it was 2006.
Yeah, and I have portfolio 1110. I don't know if it's the same because I can see there's 2.
No, 1110 is a different building.
So this one is like a piano style that you're talking about?
Well, this is all one site. It's all one folio. I split it into 2 folios myself.
Because I didn't find exactly the price for the other one. So I
Good.
bought it in 1975.
We hit it.
4.5 million in 1975.
That wasn't me.
No,
I wish.
1980s, I don't know if it's important to tell that.
Sure, tell me.
22 million and 50. And then 1983, 31 million. And 2005, they bought for 70 million.
Right, 70, yeah.
2009, the last one is 33,250.
Right, but actually what happened was someone else had the building under contract, so I bought their position out. I gave them $15 million to buy their position as the contract vendee, so I could become the purchaser of the property. So the total acquisition here was 50 in cash, and then about another 35 plus or minus in renovations, tenant improvements to get it to where it is today.
The previous owner, like you said, was a specialist in diamonds. You were an expertise in that. And they had a lot of money, right? And they were from New York. So through our discussion also, we're going to learn a little bit about what it means to know a market, as well as just because you're an expertise in another industry doesn't mean that you know how to ride the bumps and the waves of the real estate market, especially.
See, we're not buying properties based upon, well, I was going to say we're not buying properties based upon an if-come, but when I paid $50 million for this property, I knew that I could do, if I didn't build Panorama, I could stabilize this property and run it profitably at that price point. If I did nothing else. I didn't buy it, I didn't build into my price the potential profit to be realized from an if-come building. I don't do that. It's risky and it's speculative. It's risky and speculative anyway, especially residential buildings, because I can't pre-lease a residential building, 2 years in advance or 3 years in advance. So just by its very nature, much more so than an office building where an entity, for example, like FIU, we make our deal years in advance. Which lenders like to see pre-lease, as much pre-leasing as possible. So they underwrite an office building that's pre-leased a little bit more aggressively than a residential tower, which is more speculative by nature.
So when you guys bought it, you said there are only 3 tenants here. Why did you think you could do something?
Well, we bought it knowing we were going to build Panorama. And, we did so because our feel and read of the market was that the rental market was, and still is, extremely strong. And I sat on a panel a couple of months ago, some multifamily event, I don't remember what it was. I know it was at Hard Rock and I lost some money, but other than that, I don't remember really what it was. And I forgot what I was just going to say.
I was going to ask you, it sounds like you have an exit strategy when you enter into
Well, typically, yes, when I do a condo, for example, I'll underwrite it as a rental. So I know that if the condo market crashes and I don't sell any units, I can still stabilize the property and take out my construction loan, which makes my construction lenders very happy. We've come up with this structure and it makes us very desirable borrowers. We have very good banking relations. We've done deals with the same banks for 15 years, 20 years. I typically don't use mortgage brokers because our relationships are so tight that we just put together our own syndications and participations. Does anybody know what syndications and participations are?
Not everybody knows. Not everybody knows. And not everybody knows the difference between an acquisition loan, a construction loan, or maybe we can talk about those. It sounds like you didn't get a loan for this purchase.
Well, I didn't get a loan for this purchase. We laid out the cash, and one of my banks, my chief bank, as Wells Fargo, came to me and said, we want to give you a mortgage on the property. And I said, well, that's really nice of you, but the property's empty, and I can't debt service your loan. I can't meet your thresholds of loan to values and yield maintenance and debt yield and things of that nature. So they were very eager to make loans to borrowers, and they like us as a borrower. So what they actually did was come up with something very creative. They appraised the property empty, and they did what's called, instead of a hypothetical appraisal, which means they look at the property in the market at today's rates and terms, they did a forecast appraisal, which means when it's built, what will the rates be at that time and how will it stabilize later? And they said, okay, it'll take you 18 months to stabilize the building. We're going to give you $35 million loan, and if in 18 months you don't meet the criteria to maintain a $35 million debt, you can remargin the loan, meaning I repay it back down, reduce the principal till I saw that I meet those standards. And that's how eager banks are to put money out to the right borrowers. I mean, professors heard me say this before, but someone at Wells Fargo said something very wise, and they said there's some fantastic projects out there to finance. There just aren't a lot of very attractive borrowers out there to finance.
Why not?
Experience, mostly. They're looking for people, banks want to take no risk. What can I tell you? They want recourse. Do we know what recourse is? Right. Okay. Well, recourse loan means that if you don't pay back, they can come after you personally. Non-recourse means the security for the debt is only the real estate, and they can only take the real estate. They can't come after you for the money. So we have a recourse loan on this building. It's a $340 million loan.
Let's slow down. How would you guys feel if you had a $340 million recourse loan? Ross, you're making faces.
It's a tremendous amount of debt. But the point I was making is, the bank doesn't have to come to me and take the building and say, okay, we're all square. They can call us up and say, write me a check. That's what recourse is. So
They
you,
have another option instead of just taking.
but it also gives me a better, rates and terms in the mortgage. And, you know, they underwrite the borrower at least equal to, if not greater than the project. And they do quarterly reviews of me.
Daniel has a question.
When it,
Sorry.
when it comes to recourse and non-recourse, what are the similarities between non-recourse, or if there are any, between non-recourse and bankruptcy remote? Or are they
Totally different thing. Bankruptcy remote entity is the corporation, the LLC, the corporation, that you take title to the property in. And what that means is that that entity will own nothing else. It won't have any other borrowings, it won't do anything other than own, manage, invest in that particular piece of property. That's all it means. They don't want two properties in one bankruptcy remote entity or single purpose entity. There's a couple different names for it. Because again, because if one project didn't do well and one did do well, they don't want the bad one to drag down the good one.
Okay.
That's the whole reason. Because they started selling mortgages years ago. I don't know if you guys have studied CMB, commercial mortgage-backed securities.
Saw the movie The Big Short. Have you seen
No, I haven't seen it.
What?
I haven't seen
It was a good movie to bring the idea of what happened with the commercial mortgage-backed securities. to life.
it. That's how it all originated. That's how the single-purpose entities and bankruptcy remote entities originated. Because if you're buying a bond, you don't want your collateral to be adversely affected by another piece of property that has nothing to do with your piece of property. And recourse is just the nature of the loan. It's the ability to the bank to seek collection under a default. So if it's recourse, they can call you, they can call Daniel and say, pay me back my money, or they can say, we'll take the building. If it's non-recourse, they can't come after you at all. They can only take the building. You just give them the keys and probably not do any more deals with the bank.
Does it?
So in the situation where they want to take back the building, but that doesn't suffice the debt, can they still come after you for the difference?
Sure, that's deficiency judgment.
Okay.
Yeah, and not only that, but if they foreclose, you're barred from bidding for your own property.
Right.
I think Bruce had a question about that. And could your relatives bid for it?
No. It's like Trump, like Ivanka can't be, Secretary of State.
You probably want to. Yeah. So let's just go over, because I don't think everybody, why would a bank give a non-recourse?
Because they get a higher interest rate.
They get a higher, Ross, had you
It would be a
heard?
lower loan to value, it would be a lower, everything would be to the benefit of the bank.
We'll only do one under 60%.
Ross works at,
Even on a recourse, it's getting 70, even getting over 70 is tough today. But because of relationships, and I can't, and Professor hears me say this every single time, relationship. They're your bankers, but you gotta make business fun. You gotta do business with people you enjoy doing business with, who are reasonable. And those relationships, going out and playing golf, going to have dinner, even a negotiating session, it doesn't have to be adversarial. And those relationships are where they'll go from a 11 debt yield to an 8.5 debt yield, or a 70 to a 75 LTV, because they want to make the loan to you. Yes?
Okay, so I've always heard that it's better to try to build those relationships with maybe smaller banks, like let's say Citibank or Ocean Bank, something more local. And you said that you did some of the financing, or Wells Fargo came after you to finance you. So how did you build that relationship with them? Because I know Wells Fargo.
So over time, over years. I mean, I'll tell you the story. I mean, there's a gentleman who runs Wells Fargo here named Pat Ramge. I did a deal. My father had a friend who was a banker for a bank called Comerica, who doesn't do any real estate anymore. And Pat was that gentleman's underwriter. That's how I met him, maybe 15, 20 years ago. And then he left there, went to Wells Fargo into a much higher position where he could make loans on his own, and I followed him over there. So, you know, my career grew as his career grew, and we've done, excuse me, deal after deal after deal. And, you know, once you do the first deal, the rest are really relatively simple. It's the same loan documents. What they said no to before, they're going to say no to again.
How long are your loan documents? How many pages?
200 to 400.
Could they give you shorter versions?
They probably could, but then the lawyers couldn't bill that many hours.
Do you read that?
I read every single word. I print them. I even spoke to an attorney who said any transactional attorney that reviews their documents online is not giving you their money's worth. I print out, I'm sorry to say, I kill trees.
I tell them to.
And I sit there with my pencil and I make notes on every single page and go over every single page with my attorney, because when I'm signing, or I'm going to have my dad sign a recourse note, we all know what a note is, right?
Who had our note last week? No, I thought it was Arturo. Didn't you give the
He
note?
gave me the note.
Oh, no, who was the note maker? Who made the promise?
Oh, Arturo.
Arturo, you made the promise.
You pay back?
Very good. No, he didn't.
Oh my God, is it recourse or non-recourse?
Okay.
Okay.
He did pay that.
But if I tell him to go into my dad and say sign here, because he's not reading them. That's my job now. And you know, it's you got to know what you're signing. You know, and I need to know that within the confines of those loan documents, and that the bank gets everything they're entitled to, but I can still run my business in an expeditious, you know, an economical way, of course.
When you first started reading loan documents, didn't they seem just like a bunch of legalese? And didn't you want to say, like, I'm confused, I just want to give up?
No, because my IQ is very high. No. Listen, I'm not an attorney. And the irony is my brother, who's 11 years my junior, who's our corporate counsel, who went to school and trained as a transactional attorney, does not read the loan documents. I read the loan document. And I read it line by line, and I've been dealing with the same attorney for 20, 25 years. You know, he knows my comments, I know his comments already, and I love reading them. I really enjoy it. And when I don't understand, I'm not embarrassed to say, what does this mean? What is this in here for? You know, what is the bank trying to accomplish with this language? And I have a reasonable banks on the other side, because they're deal makers and their attorneys are deal-making attorneys. There's always a problem, there's always an issue that comes up in a loan document. And then you know, I run across banks who have attorneys that go, oh, that's it, the deal's over, we can't do anything about it. You know, with Wells and the group I put together, I've been dealing with the same attorney for 15, 20 years. And, you know, she figures it out. We've never not closed a deal over loan documents.
And I just brought out my favorite four-letter word with that, which is what you guys all know, read. And so I think it's important what Wayne says. I know that there was pushback in this class when I asked you to print and read the lease, and we went over a commercial lease. I've gone over the lease for this building in the past. This time we didn't use your lease, but it was a different lease, and people didn't read it. We went over line by line with an attorney. And do you read the leases too, when you're involved with leases? Well, Jerry, but he reads them, right? Right? He creates them, right. So, you know, a purpose of this class is whether it's a loan doc, a purchase and sale document, a lease document, if it's the area that you're involved in, or if you're putting money on the line, maybe you're not putting 300 million on the line, but maybe you're putting whatever is a significant amount to you, you should read those documents. And if somebody says to you that's just the standard clause, you should understand what it means And maybe it's not standard, maybe it is standard. I know they've said those types of things to Wayne before, and he's found that, he's researched and found where it's not the standard clause, and been able to be exempt from something that would put a burden on the borrower. So that's the reason that we encourage you, we got off on this little tangent, to print and to read critically the documents. Because it's a skill, you're not going to learn just in my class, but it's something you can take away with you for when you're in transactions. So the devil is in the details when there's a problem. Yeah.
Only my mother can say because I said so. Opposing counsel can't. There has to be a reason, and there is a reason. If there's not a good reason, then there's a problem. Sorry.
One question, why are you guys so under-levered in this project?
Because that's our philosophy.
Yeah.
We want as little leverage as possible. So if you take 340 and you assume that's a 50% loan to value, that's a lot of equity we have in the deal. But that's our philosophy, one project at a time, putting all our equity in the deal and borrowing as little as we possibly can, because that gives us the exit strategy. And I'll give you one example, and you must be tired of hearing all this over and over and over again. We did a property called Opera Tower over on 17th. 635 units. Started it in 2005, I think it was. Completely pre-sold the building. 20% deposits, hard.
Wait, and how many people know Opera Tower? And how many units is it?
635.
603. And what year was it?
2004 or 5 we started and pre-sold the entire building.
So they pre-sold during the market where people could
Company name,
just
obviously.
like the state, just like the movie The Big Short, could be buyers like the type of people who were in The Big Short, and they could buy a lot of units. They didn't have to prove their income. They didn't have the income verification, right? And then what happened?
Well, what happened was, we went to close, in 2007 we finished the building. We said, okay, time to close your units, and only 240 units closed. Everybody else tried to sue to get their money, you saw those billboards, let us get your deposits back,
Why didn't they want to close?
Because I guess the value had come down.
So they put them under contract for a different purchase price than they were able to get financing for, or then they were worth it more. So people tried to use their lawyers or read. Maybe they didn't read their,
You know what they sued for? You know what they sued for? Because our brochure said designer ceramic tile.
Oh my.
And they all got together and said, well, it's not designer tile.
But that's not really what they were looking for.
Why not?
They were looking for any reason to sue.
But the point being that the leverage was so low, we underwrote that condo as a rental, and we appraised it as a rental. The idea being that's our second exit. That if the market were to just disappear, I could rent the building and stabilize it out. So because we leveraged so low and had so much equity in the deal, we used the 240 sales to pay back the construction loan. So where everybody else was out there dealing with vultures, I'll give you 10 cents on the dollar, and I fixed the units up and I rented them for 8 years, and had a cash cow. And then just a year and a half ago, started putting the units back on the market, and I was picking up 40% more than I was asking for, than I had it sold for before. But if I had borrowed 85%, or 90%, or built 5 buildings and spread my liquidity over 5 buildings and had 85% financing, what would I have done? Especially on a recourse loan. I know what I would have done.
Isn't it hard for people to say no when the bank's offering them such a high percentage of financing?
Not for a real developer. Not for somebody who knows the pitfalls of over-leveraging. There are people in the city, and it's fine, who you'll notice the city gets overbuilt of every 7-8 years. There's a couple of people who go out there and will build 10 buildings at one time. And, it creates an oversupply and affects the market adversely, and then that goes away, and then the cycle starts all over again. but that's just not our style. One building at a time is enough.
Are you foregoing a little bit of IRR because you're under leverage?
No. But when I go back to acquisition to stabilization, I'm just fine. Just fine.
But I think that that's really.
It's a good question,
It's
though.
it's a hard concept for people who maybe are starting out and they feel like they need to go, if the bank says you can get this financing, they feel like they need to go for it.
Well, you know, if it's non-recourse in nature, I might be open to over-leveraging a little bit. If it's recourse, you need to be prepared to step up to the plate. You know, even, and I'll tell you another short story, you know, even with a partner, you know, because your partner may not be there when your loan comes due. And we've had that happen to us, where our partner just took off, didn't pay his half, and left us standing there, and what did we do? It was a recourse loan. It was joint and several, which means both parties were equally liable, so we had to pay his half. But it's not the bank's fault I got screwed. You know, it's just the way it was. But that's why they like us, because they know that, good or bad, we're going to step up to the plate, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk to them. We're not playing games. You know, the bank have their people here every day. We're totally transparent. They can see anything they want. In a job of this size, obviously, as it evolves, we change finishes, we do upgrades. I mean, since we started, we put another $85 million into this building. The bank didn't mind that either. But the ratio didn't change because the project cost went up, so everything moved proportionally.
I think we had a question over there.
Yeah, you answered it. You answered it.
I answered it?
Yeah.
I didn't even know what it was.
Any other questions?
Well, are there any other, I was gonna ask you to elaborate on the concern of over leveraging. Is it merely that, the recourse component of it, or would you say more than just that?
I think maybe they have to understand the risk of things that can happen, because they don't have the experience with things that can happen.
Well, I mean, one of my primary reasons for recourse, quite honestly, is to get better rates and terms. I mean, you know, when we're doing buildings of these stature, that amounts to multiple millions of dollars in interest payments. And that's really one of my prime motivators in taking recourse money.
Just in terms of, I mean, I've always heard before that as much leverage as you can get and as much as you can spread yourself in different sectors and in the more investments.
That's fine, as long as all the properties sell and are successful, that's fine. But if the market crashes, if you haven't timed it properly and you got 5 projects going and they're all recourse and they all fail, you don't have enough money to pay them back.
I think the idea is it's exciting to be a developer. I know you guys all think so, and I know everybody in Miami thinks so. And it's exciting to hear what Wayne has to say. But there's a tremendous amount of risk involved, and they've been in the business.
Even at the height of our business, we never did more than 2 a year. Never did more than 2 projects at a time.
Don't jump in. He's saying jump in with caution, and you guys like that.
You would say there's much more in development than in terms of investment in general,
Correct.
because there's already an income stream.
Oh, no, I'm looking for the income stream, but I'm not making an acquisition based solely upon the income stream that could be generated by the property. I'm buying property that I know I can add value to.
I think Arturo had a question.
Yeah.
We'll go to Justin.
When the lenders lend you money, do they look at your balance sheet or
Mhm.
also your partner's balance sheet?
Both,
Both.
personally,
Yeah.
every quarter.
Personal finance.
Every quarter, every bank that I do, personal financial statements, tax returns, K-1s, I call it my colonoscopy. Because every year, the banks come in and they go through, they know more about my business than I do. You know, what's in the pipeline, what projects am I building, what my pre-development expenses are, what my cash flows are gonna be. They create fantastic schedules that I've used. They're great. but that's what keeps them comfortable. And then they do a quarterly compliance check as well, where you have to provide rent rolls and income expense statements, year-to-date income expense statements and things like that for the property, for the particular properties.
Okay, so when you're looking at a new acquisition, personally, how many exit strategies do you need to feel comfortable with the project?
Two.
And like, in your building, are you selling anything of it, or is it all?
No, it's all rental. I mean, clearly, if there was ever a building that had the potential to be a condominium, that's it. So, you know, what you're gonna see in the building are condominium amenities and features. Type of appliances and flooring, and, you know, I have doggy daycare centers, and I have music rooms and social rooms and yoga rooms, and I got more social rooms, more amenities, you know, coming out of my ear.
Questions that are on there was, do the hotel guests share the amenities?
Yes, I made a deal with the hotel. The hotel, mostly when you deal with a hotel, you do so on a management agreement. Hotels don't like to lease, they like to manage, and they make a percentage of the gross income. The problem is there's always a gross income, but there's not always a net income, the way the hotels operate. So we don't do that. We said to them, if you want this location, you have to lease it from us, like a dry cleaner, like any other tenant. So that hotel is on a lease. I get a lease payment. I don't get I don't care about percentages. I don't care about
But
ADRs or.
you didn't do what the hotel wanted, you did what you wanted, right?
Well, we told you if this is what you want, this is what it is.
So in commercial real estate, we see as compared to the, strictly residential for statute 83 part 2, there's a lot more creativity that can come into it, but you have to know your arena that you're playing with. And Tony had a question about the about.
Which hotel chain is?
Hyatt.
Cost.
Hyatt.
And what factors do you consider when you make that decision to develop a condo?
We look at the market, we look at where we feel we are in the cycle of the market, and we look at what's going on currently and recently. From the moment we opened up Opera for rental almost 10 years ago, I have a waiting list. The rental market statistics show there is a market for our 821 units. In fact, we opened our leasing center 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. You may be seeing billboards around saying, "Are you a Bricolista?" That's us. That's our teaser campaign. Like, you like Bricolista?
I love it.
I wasn't sure about it.
Amazing.
I wasn't too sure about it, but we've gotten 200 inquiries already. Almost 200, 180 some odd.
I made one today, I went to
Did
see
you?
and sent back.
2 people actually came in and put deposits down.
But I want to ask one question to the class actually. How many fully rental buildings are on Brickell?
One Broadway is not next.
One Broadway is another one.
But they're not so many. And a lot of times what we find, is a secondary market where if you want to rent on Brickell, you're renting from an owner who maybe doesn't have the capacity to manage, right? The absentee owner doesn't have the capacity to manage in the way that a full management company could manage. So a lot of people, and I'm sure, they did their research to decide to go rental, was looking at the market, looking at what's needed, and also determining the financing. A lot of people would prefer to be with a professional, rent from a professional company, right?
So basically, just when you wanna rent the apartments, the hotel for different companies, the office space for different companies, and the retail space. The top roof,
It's being rented.
okay.
We actually put a restaurant up at the top, observation deck on the top.
And also the valet parking is another income, and you have another.
If you want to see the income sources, I'll print one up and I'll show it to you.
If I want.
But essentially, yes, you've hit them all.
And the valet parking also, and today I met someone very interested about the antenna. He's looked high roof too for put antenna for cellular. Also, do you consider that or not?
Yeah, sure. I always make a spot on my roofs for antennas. In fact, even when I do a condominium, I condominiumize areas of my rooftop so I can keep them, so I can derive antenna income.
Yes.
Question. With land scarcity becoming an issue in Miami-Dade County, what's your take on extending the UDB line?
I don't go west of Brickell, so I don't care. It's a good question, because you're right, there's nothing left anymore. You know, I mean, we got very lucky with this site. The only other vacant site is ours, which is the vacant land over, you know, next to the Jade behind us here. But there's really nothing else. The only other thing around is the Four Ambassadors, but it's condominiumized, and I don't know how anybody's going to go in there and partition that or end up with that. So, but that's too rural or suburban for us. We already have in our pipeline the next 7 projects, and most of them are urban, and a couple of them are in Clark Gables, but most of them are urban.
Is the rumor true that you can see the llamas from the rooftop?
That's what my brother said. So he said not the Bahamas, he said Bimini. So who am I to question my brother?
Yeah, why medical offices?
Because the demand was there for that. And you may notice that there's a lot of the hospitals are doing, and that's not a sure thing either, but that interest has been expressed. You notice these urgent care centers coming up around. There's a lot of hospitals who don't have a presence here in Brickell, and are recognizing the density of occupancy and population. And we've been approached and are in dialogue with a couple of hospitals who would use it as a urgent care center and some teaching elements as well.
That requires certain infrastructure
Yes.
specific for that, so I'm guessing it's already built.
That's why that's why I'm talking them really fast.
Ah, okay.
Because, for example, I didn't plan on putting a restaurant on the 48th floor, or the 85th floor, 84th floor. So when I made my deal, I had to go hurry and make sure and bring up more electric and bring up more water, and how they're going to get their garbage down and how they're going to get their food up, and so yeah, I need that information quickly. Otherwise, you're right, I could build myself out of the market for that.
You have to be doing a lot of studies.
You don't do a lot of things simultaneously, yeah.
Not really an important question, but is this the first time you all had that diverting air traffic has been a consideration?
No, we probably the first one we had that issue was Venetia, which we built as the Grand, which is 42 stories, which is right on the landing pad. So we're familiar with FAA, and of course we're one of the 3 developers with approvals for 1,049-foot towers. It's us and Berkowitz and Swire.
Did you have to go through a zoning process?
Oh, yes.
The city?
City and then the FAA, yeah, county, FAA.
How long does the zoning process
Less than a year.
take? But about a year. So you see that even though they're big developers, they have a big investment, they can't just build whatever they want.
It takes yeah, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. But there's build by right, which means the property has a certain zoning designation, and by right, you can build 50 units per acre or whatever the designation is on that site. We don't really get too mired in those restrictions. Our relationships are very good with the cities and the counties, and typically we're successful in getting what's the word I'm looking for? Come on, help me out here. Variances, thank you, variances.
You know, 300 Biscayne is using that
It's supposed to be as follows.
I looked at that. The problem is they've got virtually no frontage on Biscayne Boulevard. They've got they got a driveway on Biscayne Boulevard to handle 2,000 units. Something to right out there. It's not a bad site. It's not a bad site at all. It's a very nice site. And for the right number, would I look at it? I might, but to be honest with you, I already have a big tower that I'm going to do after this. But we are a little bit of a deal junkie, so I don't know. But unless I could pick up the hotel for a fair price, but PMG went in there and picked it up for like 60 and flipped it for 80 or something like that. So that's too expensive for me.
Can you give me an example of your limited partnership structure? Do you guys take up?
No limited partnership.
Nothing.
We use LLCs. And it's just very simple, me, my dad, my brother, maybe a couple other people in the company are managers or members, and it's just that simple. We don't overcomplicate it. There's only one entity, there's only one project I have where I have, LLPs and general partners and for tax reasons, but we keep it simple. It's an LLC and we're done. Dad owns all the shares, it's very simple.
Martin?
Yes, can you talk more about the process of selecting the construction company?
Sure. Because of my dad's knowledge, he has a degree in architecture and engineering, and he's a GC himself. He essentially calls them in, he says, here's the project, here's the plans, and here's the cost. And they go, what? And they do their takeoffs and they do their estimates, and you'll have a couple of companies do it who you feel are capable of doing a job of the size we're contemplating. And then it's a lot of negotiations. Material costs are material costs. I mean, there's not that much you can do about it. But general conditions and overhead and supervision and things like those things are for example, I'm paying $30 million just in general conditions for Panorama. General conditions are what it costs to run the job. It's not the job. It's just the people, the materials necessary, and administratively, it's a big number.
Now that you're going to be the pioneers of these high rises, how do you see Miami in 5 years?
Well, that's really up to you.
I'm asking you.
That's up to you. I think what happens in 5 years, what am I going to do in 5 years? I know what I'm going to do in 5 years.
No, how you see the future of the city?
I think the city is a global city.
Yes.
I think we're a global city geographically. I don't think we have the global infrastructure in place. I think that's happening now. I think that includes a 1,049-foot tower where you could bring in the type of tenants that make this a global city. Major banks, major institutions who maybe now are located in South America or Central America or Atlanta, because they had no choices. They had nothing to do here in Miami. So I see us with more recognizable as a global city.
How do you account for increasing costs in construction for a building that you're delivering in a couple of years while still maintaining certain profit margins?
Well, you either enter into a contract with a firm price, or on occasion, for steel, for example, I negotiate quarterly readjustments in some price with a not to exceed. So, for example, I saved $5 million on steel so far, because steel prices dropped from the time I signed the contract. Everything dropped after I signed the contract. Honestly, they did. So you can put some readjustment numbers in there into your contracts. That's not an unusual clause. Because you really don't want, I don't want my subs to get hurt. I don't want a sub in there to lose money, because I'm not gonna get good quality out of him. He's entitled to a profit, but it's gotta be a fair profit. I'm not looking to get, I don't wanna be gouged.
So even though you have a GC, you're still watching what happens, you know, like.
We are so involved, we work in conjunction with the GC to buy out the properties. You know, we negotiate with the elevator companies and the masonry companies and the drywall companies, and now it has to pass their muster because I'm not in privity with them at all. I will have no direct contractual relationship with that subcontractor. The contractor will, so it has to meet their financial strength standards as well, which I want them to. Plus, we force every subcontractor over $5 million to bond.
Why?
So if they go away, the job doesn't stop.
So I was gonna explain something really fast. So sometimes, I think a lot of people think it's very easy to be a developer, right? I know a lot of, because they say, I want to graduate from the MSIRE and I want to go build a tower, right? But there's a lot that goes in, there's not just a lot, there's years of experience that goes into being a developer. And what we've been talking about right now is a little bit about the construction process. So they hired a GC, a general contractor, Tudor Perini, to be the GC of this site. And they're on some of the videos and some of the press releases on the website. You can read about them. I think they're out of California? Yeah, California. And a public company, big company. And some developers would say, you know what, maybe I live in another country. I hired a very famous GC. I'm just going to let them do their thing, and I'll check on it once in a while. And that's a lot of times when people run into trouble. And you're going to see with Wayne's company, they're very hands-on, even though they have a GC, and the GC manages the subcontractor. Subcontractors have the specialties. They do the different types of work, like electrical, plumbing, I don't know, flooring, all different kinds of things, walls, materials. When you're building a construction project, a lot has to do with the critical path, which is the timeline of a sequence of when things have to be done. And it's a little like time is of the essence in your real estate deals, but it's actually much more serious, because if one thing doesn't get done in a construction project, then other things can't get done. And then the time for the construction loan is ticking away, right? And they're not meeting, the borrower, who's the developer in this case, is not meeting their time frames. So they have to be very on top, right? Even though they have this super duper very excellent public company general contractor, they have to be very on top of it. Now, again, maybe tomorrow you guys aren't going to be building your own, tallest tower in Miami, but maybe in the future you will be. So these are just lessons, or maybe in the future you'll buy a house or multifamily. These are just lessons to keep in mind. Like when you hire a GC, you still need to watch them. When you have documents, you still need to read them. We're using a super big example to bring those lessons to life.
The professor's right. We are, I would say, 25% of the tenants in this building are me right now. Are me.
Are you?
Yeah.
Really?
My engineers are here, my in-house engineers, in this building, my in-house engineers, my architects, my owner's reps, my construction managers are all here.
Why?
Because they're on the job every single day.
They're watching that job in the backyard.
I can't tell you the problems, every day. The door didn't come in, oh, my dad called me.
Some people here who met his dad at the, some people here met your dad at the holiday.
Oh, yeah, right.
So, they enjoyed it.
No, he hasn't called, I'll call him later. He's not calling now, he called before. He's probably for you anyway.
I asked earlier that it was true that the dad came with the $18. I just really.
I don't know.
I want to talk about his dad.
He probably had $18 on him that night.
I want to talk about the second part after this. Yeah.
He was interviewed one time, and the guy said to him, "How much money is in your wallet right now?" And he went, $87. I don't know if he made it up or not.
Okay, we have David.
So for your different projects, do you usually go through a bidding process when you choose your architect and construction managers, or is based?
I use my in-house architect. Although I will go outside for, I'll go outside for shop drawings, because I don't have that many people. I don't want to start a whole architectural firm, but the primary designs and the D&D design and development drawings are all done in-house.
I have a question. How many people are in your in-house team? Just about. Right.
20 to 30.
And that's important. That's important. A lot of people think that developers who build massive projects have massive staff. But normally they have an in-house team that are trusted professionals that have been with them for a long time. And they are the ones that are going to be looking, they have an in-house counsel who's his brother. They have an in-house architect, but they're managing everybody else. But the team itself doesn't have to be that huge.
It doesn't. And I forgot to mention before we were talking about critical paths. We do build in liquidated damages into the construction contract. Thank you. And conversely, they have liquidated damages against us, because for example, if I'm supplying the elevators and the elevators don't show up on time, it's not their fault. So it works both ways.
Liquidated damages are like a penalty. So if the contractor doesn't do something right or doesn't do it on time, it's a monetary.
Well, it's just like you said, because it's a domino effect. If they don't get the wall poured in time, then the elevator company can't come in, and then the next guy can't come in, and then it costs me, every day costs me interest. A lot of interest.
Sebastian.
Question, I read that Panorama Tower got accepted to the EB-5 visa program.
Yeah, we just didn't accept.
How does that process work?
We didn't accept. We're not in it.
Right.
We didn't want to. Essentially, a foreigner can come in with $500,000, and invest in real estate. This is my understanding. I'm not an expert in it. As long as it creates at least 10 jobs, as I recall, and then after 5 years they get a visa. So when the city wanted to be a regional EB-5 center, and they needed a model project, so they came to us and asked if they could use Panorama. But when Tomas Regalado calls you, you listen. And we said, of course you can use it. But we already had our financing in place, because it's a couple of years before you can get enough money that's really meaningful for a project of this size. So what we did to keep them happy, and it's fine with us, is they can continue to raise EB-5 money, and I don't know that they raised any, to be honest with you. And I would only use it as part of a takeout of the existing construction debt.
EB-5, if you guys have questions, I can send you to a website or to some
Don't.
EB-5 is
Too hard.
It's complicated. It's complicated. We have a question over here from Eduardo.
With your GC, do you have like any particular type of construction contract that you like to use over?
Sure. Well, there's an AAA contract form, so that's always the template that you use.
Do you use like a GMP, for example?
Well, actually, there's either GMP or GMAX. So right now I'm on a GMP, and it just because the reason I do that is because we're so involved. I think I can save money going that way.
How long are those contracts now?
Well, the standard form is probably 40, 50 pages, but you can have a 50-page addendum.
Would you guys read it?
That's Jerry's job. Jerry's my brother.
Yeah, so they do read the construction contract.
No, we create our own contracts. I mean, it's all negotiated and put together in-house.
Sure.
Yeah, does this site and the adjacent site, do they have unique zoning characteristics?
No, we actually put it together, and went to the city with one site. So we bought it as one parcel and received permission to construct, call it, let me round it off, say 3 million square feet, of which there's 300,000, so I can build 2.7 million over there.
And they had to work with the city because their parking requirements for an office building, and you guys weren't here in school, I was, when they knocked down our parking lot. And they found an alternative for us. We parked in their other site, but they had to work with the city to get that.
We didn't knock down your parking lot. We replaced your parking lot with a much finer.
They lost the pin, they got breathed on, they had a lot of, not so fast, but they were able to work with the city to do those things. And remember, they came in with a vision. They bought a site that had 2 office buildings that were a little bit older, right?
A little bit older.
And they're turning it into an office building that's now cash flowing. When they bought it, it was not, right?
Correct. And what's nice about this, and what's unique about this project, and one of the reasons the lenders like this project is because this building's cash flowing. This building is paying for the interest of that building. So, it's so rare for a lender to get into a project that has cash flow to carry itself on a construction loan.
And you had to invest, I don't know how much it was, about 12,
Here,
yeah,
35.
5. So they had to come in and they had to invest money before they could get the tenants.
Oh, yeah, that's sure. I mean, the elevators in the North Tower ran on batteries. I went into the elevator room and it was filled with car batteries. Floor to ceiling batteries. I mean, it needed a lot of work.
We have David.
In terms of the business structure for this type of business, what do you prefer to have an LLC over an LLP or corporation?
That's what our accountants tell us is the best way to do it.
And I think they counted as an important point. In real estate, it's very important to talk with your accountant when you're buying, when you're selling, and when you're structuring. I don't do a class on accounting. In the past, I had done a class with foreign purchase structures, but I haven't done one in a while. But it's very important, especially if you're not U.S., to structure how you're gonna own and dispose and transfer that deal, so that you're not hit with crazy taxes, or you can.
Like my brother's much more into that. My feeling is that no meeting requires more than 2 hollows. Or really, 1, quite honestly, but 2's okay. So, even though we all meet and we all understand what each of us are doing within the organization, I can't be in every meeting, and he can't be in every meeting, and my dad can't be in every meeting. So, we obviously rely on each other quite heavily.
Ross.
I assume developers don't operate exactly next to other developers. Is there any level of competition between you and your organization?
Yeah, we're going to kick everybody's butt. We're going to build the biggest building first, baby.
What is that?
No, there's no. Listen, I don't see my dad as a guy with an ego. If he did, he'd wear nicer suits. But I think he'd like to build the first 1,049-foot tower. But no, I don't really see that. I remember in the '60s when we built what was then the tallest building. It was 22 stories. And Marty Margulies built Grove Isle, and it was 24 stories. And someone else went and built 26 stories. So you get a little bit of that going around, But it's not.
No car elevators coming up?
What kind of rentals are you gonna charge, like price per foot?
For you?
Well, I'm sure you're happy to
For
know.
use?
I was reading this report in 2005. The vacancy rate in Brickell was 15%, and this year we're down to 4%.
Right, but you can't. Where's Brickell? Brickell's a market, a sub-market, and Brickell has sub-markets.
Right, east of Brickell is a big deal.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's filled with West Brickell.
So what do you plan to charge per foot for rent?
$3.25 average. But I will roll back the rents about 15-20% to get the pump primed.
Like 1 year leases.
Well, in the beginning, my idea was I'm going to give 2-year leases to the first 200 units. Because as I stabilize the property, as I rent from the bottom up, I don't want to be competing with myself against a unit that's already been occupied on the lower floor. So I figure if I take the first 200 or 250 units and I go 2-year leases, I give them an advantage because I lock their rent in. And it lets me stabilize the whole building before I start having any rollover tenants in there. So with an average of 3 1/4, obviously I'm going to have units in the 2s and I'm going to have units in the 4s.
And I want to go back to what you said about submarkets. One of the questions on your sheet is, how do you think a developer or a seasoned developer knows their market? He doesn't just call it Brickell, right? He's looking at the submarket specifically where he is in Brickell.
East Brickell.
So it's a little bit like what they teach you in the real estate school about farming, being the expert in your area. This is more than farming, because this is a place where you're putting all of your investment. So you really need to know, or a lot of your investment, right?
Yeah, but the submarket is not, the knowledge of the submarket is very, very important. Because you can put my building up on the west side of Brickell and I wouldn't think it's comparable. That's one of the problems I have, and especially when we do the appraisals of these kind of buildings. There are no comps. There's no comp for Panorama. There's no retail on Brickell Bay Drive. There's no office space on Brickell Bay Drive. So it's, the appraisers are a little, gun shy to go out on a limb and say, okay, I think I'll project that you can get X or Y.
What do you feel is going to be your, after Panorama and moved on, what do you feel is going to be your development process for residential and commercial?
Well, I think after this project, we do whatever we think we'll rent in the market. I really don't have a preference. The next project will probably be the empty lot over here, which is a condominium.
Next to Jake.
Well, I've sold off 75%.
In that vacant lot,
Mhm.
just as operated as a parking lot?
No,
that's
not
the-
the land.
No, I sold 75% of the land. The McCourt family, who you may know owns the Dodgers and LA Dodgers and all that, they came in and bought 50%. So my partner and I liquidated our 50% down to, and it was a good sale.
Danny.
When it comes to like the cost approach and income approach, which evaluation would you particularly use for this building?
Well, it's not up to me.
Nah?
It's up to the lender.
Okay.
I like value, loan to value, they like loan to cost.
Yeah, the less tricky too. No, yeah, I also noticed that, sorry, I just wanted to put, you also own, or you're affiliated with, the Florida Land Brokers, so you own land throughout the state of Florida?
Yeah, we picked up a portfolio that Merrill Lynch, in the old days, they were investing in tax certificates. And they had acquired 7,000 tax certificates for $30-some-odd million. I mean, it was, whatever. And they realized that, it's really not their business. So we made a deal and we picked up all their pieces and we're slowly selling them off. Yeah. I'm not going to build. These are lots. These are residential lots. It could be one lot in the middle of 27 lots. It could be a subdivision. They're all over the state.
Adela. You don't have any future project at the Miami River? But on the Miami River, we cruised by a project that his father had built, 444 Brickell.
Right.
It was the first high-rise downtown. And why do you have any of the future?
It's not my market.
Oh.
It's not my market. Yeah.
Lou, you might ask them.
Oh, you have a last
Okay.
question?
Have you received any offer for the whole project?
Which project?
Panorama.
Do you want to answer?
Have you received any offer?
I haven't received offers. I have had expressions of interest from 2 or 3 entities, one to purchase, one to refinance, and one to joint venture. And you know, we're talking about a project upon stabilization that's going to be worth over $1 billion. There aren't a lot of players out there who I'm willing to talk to. You know, I get a call from, hey, my name's Dave, I'm from Joe's Capital in New York, I got a guy who wants to buy your building. Great, call me tomorrow, you know. I don't know who you are, I don't know who your client is, you know, because when you go to market a property like this, I don't market my properties, I don't build to sell. You know, people come to me and say, do you want to sell? So, you know, I'd have to see who it is and are they really qualified. But yes, it's garnered national attention, international attention. But right now, that empty site is garnering all the attention.
Arturo.
I guess for that project, the development cost has to be over $1 billion, given that the land value itself should be around 300 million, right?
The land value for Panorama, you mean?
No, for the other one.
For the other one, the land value is probably closer to 400 million.
So
But that doesn't mean that's my cost. It means that's my value.
Yeah.
So when you know, how is the lender going to underwrite it? Loan to cost or loan to value? I don't want to tell you what I paid for it, you know, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
I think I spent $22 million on it.
Exactly. But luxury residential, I mean, it causes.
I told you when times are bad,
Yeah.
that's when you go out and buy.
This is gonna be our last question before we go to dinner. We're all gonna go to dinner together on the second floor, and even if you brought your own food or don't want to eat, you can still come with us, because you'll have more opportunities to talk. Yeah.
Just interested to hear your thoughts on the outlook of real estate in general under this administration.
Which administration? I'm going to buy some Trump hotels, I think. That's what I'm going to do. You know, it's interesting. The market's up. You know, I think the economy so far seems to be responding in a very positive way. I don't think it'll have any direct impact on real estate, you know, per se, you know, here. If he can do away with or modify Dodd-Frank to an extent,
I think it's going to be directly the deregulation of banks.
that'll help me a lot.
Right, that's not my
Yeah, Dodd-Frank's the killer. It makes it really changed the borrowing, lending, you know, skyline. And the bankers hate it.
Yeah, obviously. It did nothing to prevent Wells Fargo doing what they did.
Mr. Stump took the fall. He's a wonderful guy. I know him. He's the consummate banker and gentleman. You know, did he know about it? I don't know. Probably. But he took the fall.
Elizabeth pushed him out though.
Yeah. Yes.
So with that, we're going to break for dinner. We're going to the second floor, and you guys can follow me. Okay.